Last winter, I moved to a new home in a new town. I'd only visited the town once for a job interview, and once I got it, I pretty much had to move there. It was a really big step up in my career, so I was really eager for everything to go well. Because the town was kind of in the middle of nowhere though, it made the moving process not so ideal. I had to find a home for rent online and go through the process that way. I know it's not the best way to go about it, but I thought it'd be okay since I'd only be renting for a year and I could always find somewhere else afterward. On December 1st, I packed up everything in my truck and made the drive. I only stopped to fill up the tank along the way, but even then, I didn't make it into town until 9. Like I said, I had been here before when I did the job interview, but I'd never seen the town at night before. It was kind of eerie, as the streetlights were very dim and most of the stores were closed, so all the lights were out. I wasn't used to these smaller towns, so this was very different to me. There wasn't anyone driving around either. It almost felt like I was driving through a ghost town. Another 5 minutes later, I pulled into the neighborhood and up to my new house. It was very small and was in a row next to other similar houses. I parked on the driveway and got my air mattress out, then headed inside. I had sold basically everything before the move, planning to buy new stuff once I got here, so I knew I'd be stuck with an empty home for a while. Inside though, the place was about what I expected. It was old and outdated. The wooden floorboards creaked with every step, and the house had a musty smell to it. The layout was simple though. It was one floor with a kitchen and living room, and one long hallway leading to the 2 bedrooms. After quickly looking around, I turned the lights back off and went into the master bedroom, tossing the air mattress down and turning on the pump to get it full. I sat on the floor, tired from the long drive and the stresses of moving. But as I was sitting there, I heard a creak from the other side of the house. It was just one small creak, but it was very distinct, sounding exactly like one of the floorboards. My initial thought was that it might be a raccoon or something that had taken up shelter in the empty home. So I got up and went down the hallway toward the living room. I didn't even bother walking to the front of the room to turn the lights back on. I just glanced around. The room was just as empty as it was before though. I didn't see any signs of anything. I figured it was nothing. Maybe being tired and stressed made me overthink it. After all, this was a new home, so I wasn't familiar with any of the sounds it may be making. I went back to the bedroom. The mattress was full now, so I tossed a blanket on it and laid down. Tomorrow I had a lot to do, so I wanted to get as much sleep as I could get. Despite the not so great setup, I passed out pretty soon after laying down. When I woke up, I remember opening my eyes and seeing absolute darkness. It looked like I still had my eyes closed. That's how dark it was. I knew it was sometime in the middle of the night, so I closed my eyes again to try and fall back asleep, when I heard something from just in front of me. It was one of the floorboards creaking. My eyes shot open again, and I quickly sat up. I stared ahead at where I heard the sound, but still, I couldn't make anything out. I sat there motionless. It was so quiet, I could hear my heart beating as I felt a disturbing sense around me. Then there was another creak. It was further to the left of where the last one was. In my head, I started to panic. Part of me didn't even think this was real, like maybe I was still half asleep or something. Before I could shake the feeling, there were 4 consecutive creaks, each sounding further toward the back of the room. Then there was a moment where I felt like I could see the slightest shape of something in the dark before the bedroom door swung open. The moonlight shining into the hallway immediately illuminated a man as he moved from my bedroom and into the hallway. I heard him sprinting to the other side of the house as I got up and rushed to turn on the lights. By then, the front door was wide open. From the glimpse of him that I got, he looked around 40 years old, with worn clothes and boots. That was about all I could see. I got my phone and keys, then got in my truck and drove away as I called the local police station. From everything I told them, they seemed to think that it was someone living in the house while it was unoccupied, but there's really no way to know for sure what was going on. If that was someone living in the home, it doesn't really explain what they were doing in my room, creeping around while I was asleep. Whatever the case, thankfully the owner let me break the lease and move to a different home. Had I not woken up that night, I don't know what would have happened. I had just moved across town into a small home on the outskirts. It was only 20 minutes away from where I lived, but it felt like it was more isolated and away from everything. It had a decent amount of tree-covered land, so I couldn't see any other houses or roads or anything, which made it feel really peaceful. On the day I moved in, though, I got a knock at the door around dinner time. It was an older man, like 50-ish, with long gray hair and sunken eyes. He greeted me, but there was clearly something off about him. He tried to make some small talk, but he was very awkward and had a straight, unamused face the whole time. It was a bit odd. After he left, I didn't think too much on it though. I thought it was probably just a nosy neighbor. But on the following day, while I was unpacking, there was another knock at the door. It was him again. The first thing I noticed was that he was still wearing all the same clothes that he had on yesterday, and he had that same straight face. He asked how everything was coming along, but strangely during our conversation, it felt like he didn't actually have any reason to talk to me. It was like he was dragging on the conversation just because. I had to abruptly end it after a few minutes because he just wouldn't go away. I told him to have a good night and closed the door on him. It was just getting kind of creepy at this point. I mean, I guess it would have been different if he was a really talkative and outgoing person that just wanted to meet his new neighbor, but he wasn't like that at all. He seemed like he didn't even want to talk and was just forcing himself to. I went back to unpacking, trying to forget about it, but he knocked on the door again. This wasn't a friendly knock. It was loud and demanding. I looked down the hallway at the door and could see a shadow behind the curtains that covered the window on the door. "Just leave. I'm sorry, but I have a lot to do tonight," I said, trying to keep my cool, but definitely letting the frustration show. He didn't move. He waited for another few seconds, then knocked again. At that point, I was extremely irritated and marched over to the door, prepared to yell at him. I swung the door open, and the man was standing much closer, only about a foot away from me. His eyes were dead, and his whole face and body was tense. It was like he was contemplating doing something. And that's when I looked down and saw the tip of a knife showing through the sleeve of his jacket. I slammed the door just as he pressed forward. By the time I locked it, he was already banging on the door again. It was almost even more disturbing because he wasn't saying anything anymore either, like he was possessed by whatever he was trying to do. I called the cops and double-checked every door was locked. The man stayed by the front door for several minutes, then hurried away. Cops didn't make it until well after he had left. I gave them my report of the incident, telling them that he was likely one of my neighbors. They found that nobody matching his description lived anywhere near me. None of the other neighbors had ever seen him either. We still don't know who he was, or if he's still wandering around our neighborhood anymore. Why exactly he came up to my house with a knife in his hand is unknown. Hopefully he's gone far away from here though. I had just graduated college. I didn't have much money, but was looking for a new job now that I had a degree. In the meantime, me and one of my buddies from college, Aaron, decided to rent a home and be roommates. He made a lot more money than I did, and planned on staying at the house after I moved out once I got a better job. The place was actually pretty cheap too, only a couple hundred more than some of the apartments around here, so split between both of us, it was definitely doable. The move-in went well. We each took a bedroom, then went to IKEA for the extra furniture that we needed for the living room. On the first day we arrived though, we got a letter on the door. It was just a note card taped near the door handle that said, "Welcome to the neighborhood." I guess the note's not really that weird in itself, but it had no name or indication of anything. It was just a handwritten line saying, "Welcome to the neighborhood." It almost looked sarcastic. Anyway, a couple days went by as we got settled in before both of our vacation time from work was over and we had to start our normal routines again. I just worked at a pizza shop for the meantime. The first night I got home from work though, I noticed someone standing near our house as I pulled into the driveway. It was a woman. I couldn't see much as it was dark out, but she was just looking at one of our front windows. Once I pulled into the garage and walked back out to ask her what she was doing, she was gone. I thought it was weird, but probably nothing to worry about. She looked harmless enough, and clearly didn't want any trouble because she left. Later that night, I mentioned it to Aaron, and we both joked about it. Nothing else happened that night. Another week or so went by. By then, we felt pretty comfortable with the place, and were just living our lives. This night was normal. I had work until 10, but I knew Aaron got off at 8. Once my shift was over, I drove back home. During that drive though, I got a strange gut feeling. I don't know what it was, but something just felt off. Then I pulled up to the front of the house. The front door was wide open, but all the lights were off in the house. I obviously thought it was really weird, especially since Aaron was supposed to be home right now. I parked and walked up to the door. "Aaron, why is the door open?" I yelled from the porch. The house was silent. I took a few steps inside and looked around, then pulled out my phone and texted Aaron. Immediately when I sent the text, I heard his phone chime down the hall. When I looked, his phone was lighting up on the kitchen counter across the hallway. Now this was extremely strange. There was no way he went anywhere without his phone, and he definitely wouldn't have left the door open if he did. Aaron was always really picky about locking up the place before leaving. I wasn't really sure what to do, but something in me felt like I should check his room first to see if there were any signs I was missing. I went up the stairway and up to his room. The door was open, so I walked in. At first it looked normal and it was quiet until I heard a voice behind me. I whipped around, seeing Aaron looking through a crack in the closet. Before I could say anything, he asked if I saw someone. I said no and was really confused, but he immediately told me to call 911. I knew instantly from the look on his face that this was very real, so I did what he said. We stayed quiet while on the phone, hiding in his room until the officers arrived. They came into the home, and right away there were footsteps sprinting through the house. The cops were able to get them before they got away. It was a woman. She had restless eyes and was full of rage. It was then that Aaron told me what happened. He got home from work and tossed his stuff in the kitchen, and then went upstairs to change. While he was up there, he heard a loud crash by the front door, then footsteps walking through the downstairs. He had no idea who it was or how many people there were, but he was helpless without his phone. He thought they'd probably just rob the downstairs area and then leave. Strangely though, at some point while he was hiding, they walked around and turned off all the lights. Then they went to the back of the house and didn't move. Aaron waited there for an hour and a half until I got home. It's thought that Aaron must have gotten home just before she arrived, so she probably didn't even know he was there. Clearly, she wasn't there to rob the place though, and likely had been waiting for one of us to enter the home and walk down the hallway. Had either of us done that, who knows what she would have done. That night still scares the hell out of us, and of course, neither of us stayed at that house once the lease was up.
A crime I didn't commit. It all started on a seemingly ordinary evening. I had just finished dinner and was getting ready to settle in for the night. The laundry needed doing, so I threw a load into the washing machine. That's when I saw it. A shirt, drenched in blood. My shirt, but I hadn't worn it in weeks, and it certainly wasn't covered in blood the last time I saw it. My mind raced. Had I hurt myself and forgetting about it? Was I sleepwalking? No, that wasn't it. This was someone else's blood. My hand trembled as I touched the fabric. 1,000 thoughts flooded my mind. Who could have done this and why? I threw the shirt into the sink and scrubbed at my hands, trying to wash away the horror, but the panic wouldn't leave me. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, but it wasn't the blood. Maybe it was just something else. Paint, maybe? But deep down, I knew it'd be better. The metallic smell, the dark, sticky texture, it was blood. No doubt about it. I told myself it had to be some sort of prank, a sick joke played by someone who had somehow broken into my house. But then I found a knife. It was in my room, under the bed. A large kitchen knife, wiped clean, but a faint smell of iron still lingered on the blade. I hadn't put it there. I hadn't even used that knife in days. My blood ran cold. Someone had been in my house. I searched the entire house, every closet, every corner, but there was no sign of an intruder. The doors were locked, the windows shut. How could someone have gotten into the living trace? I felt I was losing my mind. I spent the rest of the night in a state of dread, unable to sleep, unable to think clearly. I checked the locks over and over, peered out the windows into the darkness, half expecting to see someone watching me, but there was nothing. And then the next morning, things got even worse. I turned on the news, hoping to distract myself, to find some sense of normalcy. But what I saw made my blood run cold. There was a report about murder in my neighborhood. A young woman brutally stabbed to death in her own home. The police were already investigating, but they didn't have any leads. My heart stopped as the report mentioned the time of death. Just 2 days ago. That's when it hit me. The blood on the shirt, the knife under my bed. It wasn't a prank. Someone was trying to pin me on this murder. My legs gave out and I sank onto the couch, unable to breathe. I didn't even know that woman, but the evidence was there. Evidence that clearly pointed me as the killer. It was all part of the setup. Who could be doing this to me and why? I started digging into my own past, trying to think of anyone who might have a grudge against me. But no one came to my mind. I was just an ordinary guy, living an ordinary life. Panic set in. I couldn't go to the police. They would think I was guilty. I had to find out who was behind this before it's too late. I started my own investigation, going through my belongings. trying to find anything that didn't belong. Anything that might point to the real culprit, but I found nothing. I made a split decision and bolted out the back door, running through the yard and into the woods behind my house. The sound of sirens filled the air as I ran, my heart pounding in ears. I had no plan, no idea where I was going. All I knew was that I had to get away to buy myself some time to figure out what was happening. I spent the next few days hiding out, moving from place to place, never staying anywhere for too long. My mind was a mess, constantly going over the events of the past week, trying to puzzle the piece together. Who hated me enough to do this? Who had the means to pull it off? And what was I going to do? I couldn't run forever. Sooner or later, the police would find me. I needed to prove my innocence, but how? I had no idea who was framing me or why they were doing it, and the more I thought about it, the more hopeless the situation seemed. Finally, I caught a break. I overheard the conversation at a small diner in a town miles from my home. Two people talking about crime, about someone they knew had been set up. My ears perked up as I listened to their conversation, realizing they were talking about me. I followed them, keeping my distance, till they led me to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. I watched from the shadow as they met up with someone, a man I recognized immediately. Derek Foster. He was my former colleague, someone I had falling out years ago. We used to be close, but after a business deal that went bad, he blamed me for the loss, claiming I had ruined his career and leaving the town. I hadn't thought about him since, but I remembered hearing that he had returned recently. At the time, I hadn't given it much thought, but now everything was falling to pieces. Derek had been in the perfect position to set me up. He knew where I lived, knew enough about my habits to sneak into my house without being noticed, and he was cunning enough to orchestrate a plot like this, planting evidence that would make me look guilty. The truth was revealed, but didn't bring any relief or comfort. My blood boiled as I listened to Derek laugh about how easy it had been to set me up, how he had been watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I wanted to rush in there to confront him, to make him pay for what he'd done, but I held back, knowing I needed more than just an angry outburst. I needed proof. When Derek finally left, I sneaked in and searched the room, looking for anything that could tie him to the crime. It didn't take long to find it, a stash of photographs of me, taken without my knowledge, some of them showing the bloody shirt I found in my laundry, and the knife before it was placed under my bed. My hand shook as I flipped through these images, a sick feeling in my pit of my stomach. This was it. This was the proof I needed. I copied everything, taking the photos, the recordings, anything I could find that would clear my name. My heart raced as I slipped out of the warehouse, knowing that I had to get these to the authorities. I made my way to the nearest police station, clutching the evidence like a lifeline. I had to stop Derek before he could do any more damage. The next few days were a blur of investigation, meeting with lawyers and tense negotiation. But in the end, the truth came out. Derek was arrested. His accomplices too, and the charges against me were dropped. I was free, but the experience had changed. The fear still lingered like shadows they couldn't shake. I moved away, started over in a new city, trying to put the past behind me. But no matter how far I ran, I couldn't escape the memory of what happened. The feeling of being framed, being haunted, and every time I close my eyes, I can steal that bloody shirt, still smell the metallic tang of the knife under my bed. Because some nightmares you never wake up from. The uninvited guest. I woke up that morning feeling awful, sore throat, pounding headache, and barely enough energy to lift myself out of the bed. My parents had left early for the big parade in town. I was supposed to go on, but in my condition, that was out of question. So there I was alone in the house while everything else was out celebrating. I could hear the distant hum of excitement from the town square, even though it was miles away. The whole neighborhood had gone to the event, leaving me completely isolated. I spent most of the morning curled up on the couch, trying to distract myself with TV, but the loneliness was knowing me. Around midday, I heard a noise. At first, I thought it was just a wind rattling the windows, but then I heard it again. More distinct this time. A faint scraping sound came from the back of the house. My heart skipped a bit. Slowly, I got up and moved towards the kitchen, where the noise seemed to be coming from. As I approached the back door, I saw it. The lock was being tampered. My breath caught in my throat. I stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, watching in horror as the door slowly creaked open. Two men slipped in, their faces partially hidden by masks. They didn't notice me at first, to focus on making sure the coast was clear. I ducked behind the kitchen island, my mind racing. What should I do? My phone was in the living room, too far to reach without being seen. The men started moving through the house, talking low voices. They were here to rob the place, completely unaware that I was still inside. My heart pounded in my ears as I crawled towards the hallway, desperate to find a place to hide. My first thought was the pantry, but it was too obvious. I needed somewhere better. I made it to the stairs, praying that it wouldn't turn around and see me. I climbed them as quiet as possibly, wincing with every creak. My bedroom was at the end of the hall, the only place I could think that might keep me safe. I slipped inside and gently closed the door, pressing my back against it as I tried to steady my breathing. I could hear him downstairs, rummaging through drawers, knocking things over. Every sound made me flinch. I know it was only a matter of time before they started searching up the rooms. I needed to act, but what could I do? I didn't have a weapon, and there was no way I could fight them off. Then it hit me. The attic. There was a small hatch in the ceiling of my closet that led there. It wasn't the best hiding spot, but it was all I had. I quickly moved into the closet and pushed a chair under the hatch. With shaking hands, I climbed up and lifted the panel. Pulling myself into the dusty space above, I carefully lowered the panel back into place, hoping they wouldn't notice it. The attic was dark and crumpled, filled with old boxes and forgotten junk. I squeezed myself into the corner, trying to stay as quiet as possible. Below, I could hear them moving around, getting closer. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest, but I couldn't believe that it's happening. After a short while, the men finally made their way upstairs. I could hear them opening doors, talking to each other in frustrated tones. They were looking for something specific, and it was clear they weren't going to leave until they found it. Then one of them spoke, his voice sharp and angry. "Someone's here," he said. My blood ran cold. They must have found something that tipped them off. Maybe the chair I used to climb the attic, or something I left out of place. I bit down hard on my lip to keep from making any noise. I heard footsteps in my room, the door creaking. They were close, too close. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find the attic hatch. Suddenly I heard a loud crash. They'd kick over the chair, probably trying to get me to react. I stayed perfectly still. Even as tears welled in my eyes. They were furious now, tearing the room apart, but they hadn't found the hatch yet. I needed to do something. I couldn't just sit here waiting for them to find me. I had to escape them, then look for help. Slowly, I moved towards the hatch, praying it wouldn't make a sound. I gently pushed it open and peeked out. The room was a mess, but I couldn't see them. They must have moved on to another room. I slipped out of the attic, landing softly on the floor. I moved as quickly as quietly as I could down the hall. I could still hear the men nearby, but they hadn't noticed me. Unfortunately, clumsiness gave me away as I bumped into a shelf, making a loud noise. The men spun around, and their eyes yet met mine. Panicked, I turned back and ran, but they were fast. One of them grabbed me, pulling me back. I screamed, kicking and thrashing, but he was too strong. "Let me go!" I shouted, trying to break free, but he just tightened his grip, dragging me back towards down the stairs. My mind was racing, searching for anything I could do to escape. Then I remembered the window in my hallway. It was old and probably wouldn't hold much weight, but it was only a chance. Twisted a man's grip, managing to break free. For just a second, I darted towards the window, praying I could get it to open in time. I threw open the window and scrambled onto the ledge, the cold air hitting me like a slap in the face. The drop to the ground was steep, but there was a small ledge I could land on it if I jumped right. The man lunged at me, but I threw myself out the window before he could grab me. I landed hard on the ledge, pain shooting through my ankle. I didn't have time to think about it. I had to keep moving. I scrambled along the ledge, ignoring the throbbing in my ankle, until I reached the edge of the house. From there, it was a short drop to the ground. I took a deep breath and jumped. Hitting the ground harder than I expected, pain shot my leg, but I forced myself to get up and run. Behind me, I heard a man shouting, but I didn't stop. I ran as fast as I could towards the street, hoping anyone would help me. My vision blurred with tears and pain, but I kept running, driven by sheer terror. Finally, I saw a car in the distance. I waved frantically, screamed for help. The car screeched to stop, and the driver jumped out, looking shocked. "What happened?" he asked, rushing towards me. "There were thieves in my house." I barely catch my breath. "Please help me." The man quickly pulled out his phone and called the police. I collapsed onto the ground, too exhausted to move. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air, and I finally allowed myself to believe that it was over. The police arrived just in time, storming the house and apprehending the burglars before they could escape. I watched from the safety of the neighbor's yard, trembling with relief as they were led away in handcuffs. Later, as I sat back of the ambulance, wrapped in blanket, I couldn't help but think about how close I am to losing everything. The whole ordeal had lasted only a couple of hours, but it felt like a lifetime. I know I would never forget the fear that I had felt that day. But more than that, I would never forget how I managed to survive. The hidden cameras. It all started last Thursday. I was home alone, enjoying a rare evening off. The house was quiet, just the way I like it. After a quick shower, I settled down in the living room. I was flipping through the TV channels, not really paying attention, when I noticed something odd about the picture frame on the mantel. It was slightly crooked, which wasn't like me. I'm kind of obsessive about those things, so I got up to straighten it. But as I did, I noticed something behind the frame. There was a tiny lens peeking out from the corner of the frame, barely noticeable unless you were really looking for it. I froze, my mind racing. Who the hell would put a camera in my house? And how long had it been there? I yanked the frame off the wall and stared at the device, trying to make sense of what I just had found. Had someone else broken into my house? Why would they go to the trouble of installing a camera instead of just stealing things? That's when I realized I had to search the house. If there was one camera, there could be more. Without thinking, I started with the living room, checking behind every picture frame, every bookshelf. I pulled out on the cushions on the couch, looked under the coffee table, even inside the lamp. Nothing. But then, as I was about to move the next room, something caught my eye. The air vent above the TV. It looked different. I climbed up on a chair to get a closer look. Sure enough, there was another camera, nestled inside a vent. This one was even more discreet, embedded deep within a metal grating. My heart pounded in my chest as I carefully unscrewed the vent cover and pulled the camera out. I spent the next hour tearing through my house. I found another camera inside a smoke detector in my bedroom, and yet another inside a clock of a kitchen. I felt like I was losing my mind. Someone had gone to great lengths to monitor me, and they've been doing it from every room in this house. By the time I'd searched every room, I'd found total 6 cameras. 6, each one carefully hidden, expertly placed to capture my every move. I sat down on the edge of my bed, surrounded by the tiny devices, trying to stay calm, but I couldn't think straight. What should I do now? Was taking down those things enough to keep me safe? I grabbed one of the cameras and tried to pry it open. After struggling for a few minutes, I managed to pop off the back cover. Inside, there was a tiny transmitter, a live feed, My blood turned to ice. Whoever had placed these cameras wasn't just recording me, they were watching me. My mind flashed all the times I've been home alone, thinking I had total privacy. I felt violated, exposed, and terrified. I needed to call someone, get out of the house. But as I stood up, ready to grab my keys and leave, I heard it. The faintest sound coming from the front door. A soft click, like someone gently turning the handle. My heart stopped. Someone was here. They were in my house. I held my breath, trying to stay still as possible. My mind raced. What if they had discovered the cameras? What if they knew I was about to leave? I needed a plan, and fast. I quietly backed into the kitchen, grabbing the biggest knife I could find. My mind was spinning with fear and adrenaline. I had to outsmart whoever this was. I couldn't just run. They might catch me before I got out of the door. I needed to turn the tables. Moving as silently as I could, I slipped into the pantry and closed the door, leaving it open just a crack. From here, I could see the kitchen and part of the living room. I waited, every muscle in my body tense, listening for any sign of movement. Then I saw it, a shadow moving across the living room. My heart pounded in my chest as I gripped the knife tighter, ready to strike if I had to. The figure moved closer, stepping into the kitchen. They were dressed in black, from head to toe, with a hood pulled low over their face. I didn't wait to see what they'd do next. I burst out of the pantry, knife raised, and lunged at him. The figure barely had time to react before I knocked him to the ground. We struggled, and I ripped the hood off, revealing their face. My blood ran cold to see it was my neighbor, the one who had always been so friendly, always offering to help with small tasks around the house. Somehow he had a spare key to my apartment. He didn't look scared or surprised. Instead, a slow, unsettling smile spread across his face, like he was enjoying this. "Well, you found me," he said, his voice calm, almost mocking. "Took you long enough." My hands were trembling as I held the knife, trying to process what is happening. "Why, Tom, why would you do this?" His smile widened, and he leaned back against the floor, as if this was all just a game to him. "Why not? It's not like you ever noticed. I've been watching you for months, learning everything about you. You're so predictable, you know what? Always sticking to your little routines. It was amusing at first, but then I wanted more." I felt the wave of nausea wash over me. "More? What the hell are you talking about?" Tom's eyes gleamed with sick excitement. At first, it was just curiosity, a way to pass the time, but then I realized how much I could control. I wanted to see how far I could go before he figured it out. I stared at him, horrified. This wasn't about money or blackmail, or anything I could understand. It was a game to him, a sick, twisted game, and I was his unwilling pawn. "But why me?" I asked, desperate to understand. "What did I ever do to you?" Tom's smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating look. "You were just convenient, alone, oblivious, easy to manipulate. I wanted to see the fear in your eyes when you realized you were never safe." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This man who I trusted had been watching my every move, waiting for the moment when he could finally reveal himself. He wasn't just invading my privacy, he was trying to destroy my sense of security, just for his own twisted pleasure. I felt a surge of anger, stronger than the fear that had been gripping me. "You're sick," I spat, tightening my grip on the knife. Tom tilted his head slightly. "You've got to admit it was effective," he said. "Look at you, standing there, trembling, terrified. You'll never forget it." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. He was right. I would never forget this. I stared down at him, knife still in hand. Tom didn't see to regret one bit, just lying on the floor with that smug, satisfied smile on his face. I wanted to wipe it off, to make him feel even a fraction of the fear he'd made me feel. But I didn't. I tied him up in a corner and called the police. I kept the knife pointed at him until I heard the sirens in the distance, growing louder and louder until they filled the house. They quickly took control of the situation, handcuffing Tom and dragging him to his feet. As they led him out, he looked back at me one last time, his smile never faltering. "Remember," he called over his shoulder, "I'll always be watching." The cameras were removed, the locks were changed, but a feeling of safety in my own home never returned. I moved out shortly after, unable to escape paranoia. Even in my new place, I'd lie awake at night, listening to every creak, convinced that someone was out there watching. It's been months now, and I still jump at every little noise. I don't know if I'll ever find peace again. I keep telling myself that it's over, that Tom's gone and can't hurt me anymore, but the fear is still there, lingering in every silence. If you're ever home alone and something doesn't feel right, don't ignore it. Trust your instincts. You never know who might be watching.